Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're staging something of an intervention. And it's about something that is, well, almost certainly sitting in your kitchen right now. It might be in a cupboard, maybe sitting right next to the heat of your stove. And for decades, the narrative around this particular ingredient has been, well, complicated.
Complicated is putting it mildly. It's been actively misleading.
Right. We're talking about that bottle of olive oil. For the longest time, we were told it's fat. And, since the 1980s, fat was the enemy. Then the narrative shifted slightly to it being heart healthy, but we were still told to drizzle it sparingly because, calories. We've been trained to view it as a garnish, something to add a little flavor but not too much, lest we ruin our waistlines.
And that hesitation, that use sparingly mindset, is exactly what the new data is just completely overturning. We are seeing a massive shift in how we need to categorize extra virgin olive oil, or EVOO. The research we have on the table today suggests we need to stop looking at this as a condiment, a cooking fat, or a salad dressing.
And start looking at it as what?
And start viewing it as a pharmacological intervention.
Pharmacological. That is a heavy word for something I dip sourdough bread into. You're essentially saying we need to treat the grocery store aisle like a pharmacy.
Based on the data, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you look at the magnitude of the effects we're about to discuss, food doesn't quite cover it. And we are not talking about generic cooking oil here. This is key. We are diving into high phenolic, cold-pressed, extra virgin olive oil. And the mission today is to drill into the magnitude of what this liquid actually does to the human body, from essentially rust-proofing your arteries to repairing the blood-brain barrier.
Okay, that's a big claim, repairing the brain. But before we get to the sci-fi stuff, we need to establish our ground truth. We are basing this discussion on some pretty heavy-hitting science, right? This isn't just anecdotes from a Mediterranean lifestyle blog where everyone lives to be 100 because they take naps.
Far from it, no. We are looking at the absolute gold standard of nutritional science. We have the PREDIMED trial, which is one of the largest randomized controlled trials ever conducted on nutrition. We're talking over 7,000 participants.
Wow.
And we're layering that with data from the Harvard cohorts, specifically the Nurses' Health Study and the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study, which tracked over 90,000 people for nearly 30 years.
So we have the clinical precision of a randomized trial and the massive longevity of a cohort study. So rock-solid foundation. Let's start with the heart, because that seems to be where the reputation of olive oil began.
It is where the strongest evidence lies, absolutely.
But I want to push back on the common knowledge here. Everyone knows olive oil is good for your heart. But usually that just means it's slightly better than butter or lard. It's a less bad fat. What did the PREDIMED study actually find that makes it so revolutionary? Why do we care so much about this specific study?
Context is everything here. PREDIMED took people who were already at high cardiovascular risk, smokers, diabetics, people with high blood pressure, and they split them into 3 groups. One group got a low-fat diet. This was the standard medical advice of the time, and frankly still is in many circles. Avoid fat to save your heart.
The classic cardboard diet, dry chicken breast, steamed broccoli, no dressing.
Exactly. Misery on a plate. The second group got a Mediterranean diet supplemented with mixed nuts. And the third group got a Mediterranean diet, but they were given a specific prescription. Consume about 50 milliliters of extra virgin olive oil every single day.
50 milliliters. Let's visualize that. That's not a drizzle. That's not a quick splash in the pan. That's about 4 tablespoons. That's a quarter cup of oil.
It's a significant amount. It's a macronutrient dose, not a garnish. You have to actively try to consume that much. And here's what happened. The trial was actually stopped early.
Stopped early? Usually that means something went wrong. Did it cause problems?
Quite the opposite. It was stopped for ethical reasons because the results were so positive. The Data and Safety Monitoring Board looked at the numbers and realized the people on the low-fat diet, the control group, were at such a massive disadvantage compared to the olive oil group that it was unethical to continue.
That is wild. They basically said, we know the answer, and it's dangerous to keep pretending we don't.
Exactly. The olive oil group saw a 31% reduction in major cardiovascular events.
Okay, let's parse that. 31%. We aren't talking about a 31% drop in bad cholesterol numbers or some vague biomarker, right? We're talking about hard outcomes.
Correct. We call these hard endpoints: stroke, heart attack, and death from cardiovascular causes. If a pharmaceutical company invented a, let's call it statin plus, and it reduced the risk of heart attack and stroke by 31% in a high-risk population, it would likely be the best-selling drug in history. Wall Street would go crazy. And this was achieved just by adding a specific high-quality oil to the diet.
That is staggering. It really puts the food as medicine concept into perspective. But why? What is the oil actually doing? Because for years, I thought the benefit was just about swapping saturated fat for unsaturated fat. Is it just about lowering LDL cholesterol numbers?
That's part of it, but honestly, that's the boring part. If you just lower LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol, you lower risk somewhat.
Yeah.
But the real villain in heart disease isn't just floating LDL, it's oxidized LDL.
Oxidized. Break that down for us non-chemists. I know oxidation generally means aging or rusting.
Rusting is the perfect analogy. Think of your arteries as pipes. LDL cholesterol particles are flowing through them. If those particles are stable, they mostly just flow on by. But if they oxidize, they change structure. When metal rusts, it becomes rough, flaky, and sticky. Oxidized LDL is like rusty Velcro. It sticks to the endothelium, the lining of your artery walls.
And once it sticks, it builds up. That's the plaque.
Precisely, that's the blockage. Now, here's where the extra virgin part matters. High-quality olive oil is loaded with these antioxidants called polyphenols. When you consume them, they bind to your LDL particles. They essentially act as a rust-proofing coating. They prevent the oxidation from happening in the first place.
So the LDL might still be there, but it's not sticky. It's Teflon-coated LDL.
In a manner of speaking, yes. It flows without embedding itself in the artery wall. But the benefits go deeper than just the cholesterol. The oil also treats the pipe itself.
The endothelium.
Yes, the endothelium is a single layer of cells lining your entire vascular system. It's not just a wallpaper, it's an active organ. It controls blood pressure by expanding and contracting. When it's damaged by smoking, sugar, or stress, it gets stiff. That's hypertension. The polyphenols in olive oil improve endothelial function. They help the vessel relax. It acts very similarly to a low-dose ACE inhibitor, which is a common blood pressure med.
Okay, so we've got rust-proofing for the cholesterol and a relaxant for the arteries. That explains the heart data. But you mentioned longevity, actual life extension. That Harvard study you sent over.
Yeah.
The numbers there were surprising, too, because they weren't just looking at heart patients.
Right. The Gouache-Ferré study from 2022, this was strictly observational, but the sample size was huge, over 90,000 health professionals. They found that people who consumed more than just half a tablespoon a day had a 19% lower risk of all-cause mortality.
All-cause mortality. That is my favorite scientific term. It literally means dying of anything.
It's the ultimate metric. It means you are less likely to die from heart disease, yes, but also respiratory disease, cancer, and neurodegenerative diseases. It suggests that EVOO isn't just fixing one system. It's lowering the systemic burden of aging. It's extending the health span.
Which brings us to the topic that I think is going to surprise a lot of people, the brain. We tend to separate heart health and brain health. I worry about my heart when I'm eating a steak, and I worry about my brain when I'm doing a crossword puzzle. But the data here suggests they are intimately linked.
They are the same system. The brain is the most vascular organ in the body. If your pipes are rusty in your chest, they are rusty in your head. But the olive oil effects on the brain go beyond just blood flow. There was a sub-study of PREDIMED called PREDIMED Navarra, specifically looking at cognition.
And this was tracking dementia.
It tracked cognitive performance and rates of mild cognitive impairment, or MCI. MCI is often the waiting room for Alzheimer's. After 6.5 years, the people consuming the high olive oil diet had significantly better cognitive function and lower rates of impairment than the low-fat group.
Okay, but is that just because they didn't have strokes? Or is there something specific happening in the neurons?
This is where it gets fascinating. There was a recent randomized controlled trial, separate from PREDIMED, that looked at the blood-brain barrier. You can think of the blood-brain barrier as the bouncer of the brain. It keeps toxins and pathogens out, but lets nutrients in.
And as we age, the bouncer gets tired. Or maybe takes a nap.
Exactly. The barrier becomes leaky. When it leaks, inflammatory molecules from the body get into the brain, causing neuroinflammation. This study showed that regular consumption of EVOO improved the integrity of the blood-brain barrier. It tightened the seal. It woke the bouncer up.
So it keeps the bad stuff out. What about the bad stuff that's already in there? I'm thinking of those amyloid plaques associated with Alzheimer's, the gunk that gums up the neural pathways.
This is the cleaning crew mechanism. There is a compound in high-quality olive oil called Oleocanthal. In animal models and early human trials, Oleocanthal helps upregulate the clearance of amyloid beta proteins. It essentially helps the brain take out the trash.
That is incredible. So if we think of brain fog or cognitive decline as a sort of fire in the brain inflammation, the oil is dampening that fire.
That's a great way to put it. It's a potent neuro-anti-inflammatory. It's addressing the root cause of the damage, not just masking symptoms.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here because I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, great, I'll drink a cup of olive oil. but I also know how to read a nutrition label. 1 tablespoon of olive oil is roughly 120 calories.
It is dense energy. There's no getting around that.
So if I follow the pre-dimed protocol, 4 tablespoons a day, that is nearly 500 calories.
What?
If I just add that to my current diet, simple math says I'm going to gain a pound a week. How do we reconcile healthiest food on earth with recipe for obesity?
It's the elephant in the room. And it brings us back to the flaw of the calories in, calories out model. It's just too simplistic. In the pre-diet trial, the participants were not told to count calories. They added this huge amount of oil. And guess what? They didn't gain weight compared to the low-fat group. In fact, many lost belly fat.
Physically, how does that work? 500 calories is 500 calories. Thermodynamics applies, doesn't it?
Thermodynamics applies in a closed system, but the human body is an open hormonal system. Two things are happening. First, satiety. Fat signals your brain that you are full. When you have a lunch with healthy fats, you aren't crashing at 3:00 p.m. and looking for a donut. You end up eating less later in the day spontaneously.
So it crowds out the junk. It prevents the snacking.
Exactly. In the studies that olive oil usually replaces other calories, butter, seed oils, refined carbs, it's a swap, not an addition. But the second factor is metabolic efficiency. The polyphenols and the oleic acid improve insulin sensitivity.
Meaning my body handles sugar better.
Much better.
Mm-hmm.
The PREDIMED trial showed a 40% reduction in the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. When your insulin sensitivity is high, your body is in burn mode rather than store mode. So 500 calories of olive oil behaves differently in your body than 500 calories of soda or bread. It's not just fuel, it's instruction. It tells your cells to open up and metabolize energy.
Instruction for your metabolism? I like that. It stops us from viewing food as just a battery charge. It's a software update.
Right. But, and this is a huge but, this only works if you're using the right stuff.
And this is where I feel like I, and probably most listeners, have been failing. I buy the pure olive oil or light olive oil because it's cheaper and has a neutral taste. I assume I'm getting the heart benefits. Am I wasting my money?
You might be buying a cooking fat, but you are definitely not buying the medicine we just discussed.
Yeah.
This is the most critical part of the deep dive. We have to distinguish between oil and juice.
Explain that distinction.
Olive oil is physically the juice of a fruit. It is squeezed from an olive. Extra virgin means it was extracted mechanically without heat or chemicals. It contains the oil, but it also contains the minor components, the polyphenols we talked about. Refined oil, labeled as pure, light, or just olive oil, has been washed with solvents and heat to remove flavors and flaws.
And the polyphenols. The rust-proofing agents.
Gone. Destroyed. You are left with the fat calories, but the anti-inflammatory compounds are stripped out. It's dead calories.
So if I have light olive oil in my pantry, I'm getting the calories without the protection.
Essentially, yes. You need the polyphenols, specifically two big stars, Oleocanthal and hydroxytyrosol. Oleocanthal is fascinating. It inhibits the same inflammatory enzymes, CXX1 and KOX2, as ibuprofen. It is literally a natural, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, an NSAI.
Okay, so how do I know if my oil has this stuff? Is there a lab test? Can I tell by looking at it?
There is a lab test, but you can do a field test right now in your kitchen. It's called the cough test.
The cough test sounds pleasant. How do we do it?
It's a sensory analysis. In the industry, they call it serpaggio. You take a sip of the oil, no bread, just the oil. You hold it in your mouth, then you suck air through your teeth, spraying the oil to the back of your throat.
Like a sommelier tasting a pretentious wine.
Exactly. And you wait. You are looking for a specific sensation in the back of the throat, a peppery, stinging burn. If it's high in oleocanthal, it will actually make you want to cough.
Wait. Usually, if food burns my throat, I assume it's rancid or I'm allergic. You're saying we want the burn.
We want the burn. That sting is the specific sensory signature of oleocanthal. It irritates the throat receptors in the exact same way ibuprofen does. We actually grade oils on a cough scale. A 1-cough oil is good. A 3-cough oil is high-grade medicine.
That is such a counterintuitive takeaway. We are trained to want smooth and buttery. We think good olive oil should taste like nothing.
And if your oil is greasy, smooth, and tastes like nothing, it is likely nutritionally dead. Or it's old. It might be fine for greasing a pan, but it won't clean plaque out of your brain.
This leads us to the shopping aisle. I'm standing in the supermarket. There are 50 bottles. Prices range from $5 to $50. Aside from opening bottles and coughing in the aisle, which might get me kicked out, how do I choose?
The labels are designed to confuse you. But there are 3 hard rules to filter out the garbage. Rule number 1, ignore the best-by date.
Really? That's usually the first thing I check.
It's meaningless. A best-by date is usually 2 or 3 years from bottling. But the oil could have sat in a tank for a year before bottling. You need to look for a specific harvest date.
Harvest date, so when the olives were actually picked.
Yes, and you want it fresh. Olive oil does not get better with age. Like a fine wine, it degrades, it oxidizes. You want a harvest date within the last 18 months. If the bottle doesn't have a harvest date, put it back. They are hiding something.
Okay, harvest date, check. Rule 2.
The container. We talked about photooxidation. Light destroys polyphenols rapidly. If you see a beautiful golden oil in a clear glass bottle or, heaven forbid, clear plastic, walk away.
Even if it looks premium.
Especially if it looks premium. It's marketing. They want you to see the color. But real producers know that light is the enemy. You want dark green glass, dark amber glass, or a tin can. You can see the oil. The oil is dying.
Rule 3.
The wording. Avoid light, pure, or pumice. Pumice oil is the bottom of the barrel. It's extracted from the leftover olive pulp using chemical solvents like hexane. It's industrial sludge. You want extra virgin. And ideally, look for cold-pressed and a specific region of origin. If the bottle says product of EU, Tunisia, Spain, and Greece, it's a blend of leftovers. You might product of Sicily or product of California. Single origin usually implies better quality control.
Okay, so I've bought the expensive dark bottle harvest dated oil. I've brought it home. Now, how do I use it? We talked about the 50 milliliter dose, the 4 tablespoons, but there's a huge myth we need to address. The smoke point myth.
Oh, the never cook with olive oil myth. It is incredibly pervasive. I hear this from chefs and doctors alike.
I hear this constantly. Don't sear your steak in olive oil. It turns toxic. It becomes a trans fat. Is there any truth to that?
Very little. It's a misunderstanding of chemistry. People confuse smoke point with oxidative stability. Yes, olive oil smokes at a lower temperature than, say, avocado oil or grapeseed oil, maybe around 375 to 400 degrees Fahrenheit.
Which is still plenty hot for sautéing vegetables or roasting chicken.
Exactly. But more importantly, even if it smokes a little, it doesn't break down into toxic compounds the way seed oils do. Seed oils, like soybean or corn oil, are polyunsaturated. They are chemically unstable. When you heat them, they oxidize into harmful aldehydes very quickly.
Even if they aren't smoking.
Correct. They break down silently. EVOO is mostly monounsaturated fat, which is much more stable. Plus, remember those antioxidants, the polyphenols. They sacrifice themselves to protect the oil. They take the heat hit so the fat doesn't oxidize. Research shows EVOO is actually one of the most stable oils to cook with, even at high heat.
But if the antioxidants are sacrificing themselves, aren't we losing the health benefits? That seems like a waste of expensive medicine.
You catch on quick. Yes, cooking degrades the polyphenols. You lose some of the medicine. So the oil is safe, but it's less potent.
So what's the protocol? Do I use the cheap stuff for cooking and the expensive stuff for shots?
Pretty much. I recommend a 2-bottle strategy. Buy a decent, real extra virgin olive oil, maybe a larger tin for your daily cooking. Roasting veggies, sautéing onions, it's stable and healthy. But keep a bottle of high phenolic, early harvest oil for finishing.
Finishing. This is the chef's secret.
It is. After you take the food off the heat, your soup, your steak, your pasta, you drizzle that high-quality oil over it raw. That way you get the flavor explosion and the full pharmacological dose of the raw polyphenols.
I like that. It feels luxurious, too. Now, you mentioned something in the pre-show notes about synergy, that we shouldn't just be taking shots of oil on an empty stomach.
You can, but you're missing an opportunity. There is a concept called food matrix synergy. Olive oil amplifies the nutritional value of the vegetables you eat it with.
Give us an example.
The classic tomato salad. Tomatoes are rich in lycopene, a powerful antioxidant for the heart and skin. But lycopene is fat-soluble. If you eat a tomato plain, or with a fat-free dressing, you absorb almost none of the lycopene.
It just passes right through you?
Right. But add olive oil, and the absorption skyrockets. The fat acts as a shuttle bus, ferrying the nutrients across the intestinal wall. This applies to all leafy greens. Vitamins A, D, E, and K are all fat-soluble. A fat-free salad is essentially a missed opportunity. You need the lipid to unlock the nutrition.
So the caprese salad isn't just tasty, it's a bioavailability hack.
Evolutionarily, it makes perfect sense. We are designed to eat these things together.
One last practical hurdle. Storage. I suspect I'm guilty of this one. I keep my oil right next to the stove because, well, that's where I cook.
Which is the worst possible place.
I figured you'd say that.
Heat degrades the oil. Every time you turn on your oven, you are slowly cooking your oil in the bottle. It accelerates oxidation. You want a cool, dark pantry.
And how long does it last?
This is the mindset shift. Stop treating it like a condiment that sits there for a year. Treat it like produce. Once you pop that cork or unscrew that cap, oxygen gets in. The clock starts ticking.
Just the window?
30 to 60 days.
2 months. That's fast.
If you are using the 4 tablespoons a day protocol, a standard bottle won't last you 2 weeks. The problem is people buy the fancy oil and save it for a special occasion. 6 months later, they open it and it smells like crayons.
Crayons. That's the smell of rancidity.
Crayons, old walnuts, or Play-Doh. That means the oil is rancid. And rancid oil is pro-inflammatory. It does the exact opposite of what we want.
That is a great mental shift. Don't hoard it, use it. It's a use it or lose it nutrient.
Precisely. It's meant to be consumed fresh.
So let's bring this all together into a protocol for the listener who wants to upgrade their biology starting today.
Sure. 1. The dose. Aim for 2 to 4 tablespoons daily. Don't be afraid of the calories. The metabolic benefits outweigh them.
2.
The source. The source. Scrutinize the bottle, dark glass, harvest date within 18 months, single origin.
3. The test.
Taste it. If it doesn't sting, it's not healing you. Look for the cough.
4. The method.
Cook with it, but prioritize finishing your meals with raw oil to get the maximum polyphenol punch.
And finally, storage.
Cool, dark, and use it fast.
It's a simple set of rules, but the payoff is massive. We're talking about shielding the heart, clearing the brain of potential Alzheimer's plaques, and regulating metabolism. That's a lot of power in a simple fruit juice.
It really is. It's one of the few things in nutrition where the data is just undeniably strong across the board.
I want to leave the listener with one final thought, something to mull over. We've talked about the cough score. We are so trained by the modern food industry to want everything to be smooth, sweet, and easy to eat. We want friction-free food.
We do. We want palatability over potency.
But in the world of nutrition, and specifically here, that bitterness, that resistance, that sting, that is exactly where the healing lies. It makes you wonder, if your food isn't challenging your palate just a little bit, is it actually doing anything for you?
It's a great question. Maybe comfort food isn't always comfortable for the body.
Exactly. So go check your pantry, look at that bottle. If it's clear plastic or if the date is from 2021, maybe it's time for an upgrade. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Stay healthy.